Okay, so get this. A bitter 4-year scientific war was just declared over. But here's the crazy part. Nobody's happy with the outcome. Seriously, no one. This is a story about what happens when a huge, supposed breakthrough in quantum computing just explodes into a clash of giant egos, big money, and, the very search for scientific truth.
All right, so here's the spark that was supposed to put out the fire. One of the biggest scientific journals on the planet, Science, makes a call. They take this 2020 quantum computing paper from Microsoft, a paper that had this really serious warning label on it, an editorial expression of concern, and they just swap it out for a simple correction. You think, okay, case closed, right? The fight's over.
Well, for one of the paper's main authors, Charles Marcus, this was it. Total vindication. He felt like he'd finally been cleared after what he called a draining 4-year battle. But you can almost feel the weight in that quote. Sure, it's nice to be exonerated, but that doesn't just give you back 4 years of your life spent under this massive cloud of suspicion. But then you've got Sergey Frolov, the physicist who blew the whistle on this paper in the first place. For him, the journal's decision was, well, it was the complete opposite of justice. He's convinced the paper is just fundamentally flawed, and he thinks the journal totally dropped the ball by not retracting it. To him, anything less is a failure to protect the scientific record. So, how can a single decision be seen as both a total win and a complete failure? That is the question, right? That's the paradox at the heart of this whole thing that we're going to unpack. How did a move that was supposed to end the fight just end up digging the trenches even deeper?
To really get it, we've got to understand who we're talking about and what this paper was all about. So let's meet the players and break down the science at the heart of this conflict.
Okay, so this whole thing, the entire dispute, it all comes down to the hunt for these things called Majorana particles. Now, these aren't your everyday particles. They're theoretical, super elusive, and they're basically the holy grail for a certain kind of quantum computer. The idea is that if you can harness them, you could build a stable, error-resistant quantum computer that leapfrogs the huge problems everyone else is having. So back in 2020, Microsoft and its partners dropped this paper in Science, and it looks like a monster breakthrough. They're claiming that their new device, which is built with these special nanowires, is actually showing signs of these Majorana particles. For Microsoft's quantum ambitions, this was supposed to be a massive, massive step forward. But according to Charles Marcus, this wasn't just some random scientific debate. He says there's a pattern here. He claims his critics, Frolov and his colleague, had already succeeded in getting a totally different quantum paper retracted. And after that win, Marcus believes they basically said, okay, who's next? And went after him, the next big guy in the field. Frolov, on the other hand, sees this completely differently. He says, look, this is not a personal attack. He argues that he and his colleagues have been investigating what they see as a pattern of questionable research coming out of Microsoft's Majorana program for over 5 years. For him, it's not personal, it's about holding a corporate giant scientifically accountable. So what's the actual accusation here? What did the Microsoft team supposedly do wrong? Well, when you boil it all down, it's a pretty simple and powerful claim. They cherry-picked their data, and this didn't just happen overnight. Frolov was actually one of the original reviewers. His skepticism was so strong that Science initially rejected the paper. But then, the authors resubmitted it, and it got accepted. That's when Frolov's alarm bells really started ringing. He asked for more data, felt what he got back was incomplete, and after analyzing it, he was so sure something was off that he filed a formal complaint. He went from reviewer to full-on whistleblower. And here's the core of his complaint. Frolov is basically saying, we believe the only reason they found what they claimed to find is because they deliberately showed only the good data, the data that supported their amazing conclusion, and hid the rest. He doesn't just call it cherry-picking. He alleges it's a pattern they've seen in other Microsoft papers too. And check this out. This is what makes the critics' case so compelling. A totally independent group in Austria used the exact same kind of nanowires. They did the experiments, but they shared way more data, like 10 times more. And their conclusion? They didn't find any evidence of Majorana's. This really fuels that argument that the key difference wasn't the experiment, it was what data you chose to show everyone.
But of course, the authors of the paper see this in a completely different light. They have a totally different story to tell about what happened.
From their point of view, the paper itself is solid. Marcus is adamant that there are, quote, no incorrect statements in it. He says the correction is just a minor thing, just adding a little more detail about the experimental setup. So in his eyes, when the journal removed that big warning label and just issued this small correction, that's a full-blown exoneration. Case closed. And this is where it gets wild, because you basically have two realities that just cannot coexist. The critics say, hey, this is just normal science, it's peer review, it's about making sure the data is solid. But the authors look at the exact same behavior and say, no, this is a personal harassment campaign. They're using social media to attack us and trying to shut down an entire field of research.
Yeah, and Marcus really doesn't mince words here. He basically says that what Frolov is doing isn't science anymore. He claims Frolov has made it his profession to just critique him, that the fight has moved way beyond normal scientific debate and into social media attacks.
So it's pretty clear this isn't just some squabble in an ivory tower between a couple of physicists, right? No way. This fight has huge implications because it's happening inside a multi-billion-dollar industry that is under incredible pressure to actually deliver on its promises. And let's be honest, here's the slightly uncomfortable truth about the whole field. It's not totally clear there is a quantum computing business yet. I mean, you can't go out and buy one that does something useful like you can a phone or a car. The entire industry right now is built on scientific claims and promises, not on finished products. And the money involved is just staggering. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars from companies like Microsoft poured into this kind of research. When you spend that kind of cash, you can bet there's immense pressure from the top to produce big, headline-grabbing results. You know, exactly like the ones claimed in this paper. Another critic, a physicist named Henry Legg, puts it in these really stark, kind of sarcastic terms. He basically says that after all this time and all this money, hundreds of millions of dollars, Microsoft and he have built the exact same number of these special topological qubits, which is 0. It's such a biting way to point out the massive gap between the hype and the reality on the ground. So what does all this mean? What's the takeaway here? Well, this one single, bitter fight actually tells us a ton about the new kinds of pressure that science is facing today, especially in the age of social media. It's really like a perfect storm of all these modern forces colliding. You've got the intense corporate race for a game-changing breakthrough. You've got social media being used to blast out criticism and basically do peer review in public. You've got these intense personal rivalries that can have a chilling effect on the whole field. And of course, there's that ever-present pressure to spin up early-stage research into a splashy press release. And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question. The old-school systems of peer review, they're clearly creaking under all this strain. So when you have billions of dollars, huge corporate reputations, and these intense personal feuds all crashing into the lab, who's left to guard the truth? Honestly, there's no clear answer, and figuring one out might just be one of the most important challenges for the future of science itself.